Yeah, can I see who's on? Like if there's anybody.
Sunday, we just go out. We don't go both ways. So.
Oh, so it's not like people are live.
That's right. Well, it's live on YouTube. But,
it's live on YouTube,
yeah.
but it's one way. Okay, I get it. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joe. I am giving the Dharma talk today. First time experience for me, so bear with me, please. Welcome, everyone. And if we'd like, could we start off with a chant? 1 second while I ring the bell. Incense burning, all space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddhas smell it from afar. Auspicious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. Good afternoon. I wanted to just take this opportunity. I know so many of you and your faces. I see you. I've seen you. I've been with the Sangha for the last 3 years or so, and we all know one another, possibly by name, so in some cases not. And but I don't think we know much about each other. So this is my chance to share a little bit more about me with all of you. So my wife and I, Susan, sitting in the front row there, have been coming to Hartford for about 3 years, probably a little more than 3 years now, maybe almost 3.5 years. We moved to Hendersonville in 2018, January of 2018, and we came from Massachusetts. We raised a son there and had a home, and we met in Massachusetts and built a life there. And we moved to Hendersonville to retire ultimately, but that, of course it was early and we still had our jobs, and our jobs allowed us to move down here. But in my background, I grew up in Rhode Island, Catholic religious background. Really, for me, as a kid growing up in the Catholic religion, I found that it generated a lot of curiosity for me, but I didn't know how to follow up on that. A lot of great stories about what happened back in the old days and those sorts of things, but was kind of struggling with how to follow up on that. And then in my 20s, ended up finding kind of Eastern religion. I found an ashram and a practice around meditation and that sort of thing, and that provided some answers for me, at least that there was a sort of a way to kind of understand myself and maybe how some of this spirituality worked. I was able to kind of translate some of what Jesus had said into terms that now I came to understand, and it explained a lot for me. I met Susan during a time when I was doing that, and she came to the ashram with me from time to time. got quite involved for about 10 or 12 years. And so went pretty deep, had my daily meditations, 45 minutes twice a day. Um, knew quite a bit, was pretty involved in the community, was based in Boston. And but ultimately, kind of life kicked in. We got married, we raised a child, and ultimately Boston was a little far to be going. We didn't live in Boston, so I kind of drifted away from that, and ultimately that practice. Kind of lived the householder life for several years. So when Susan and I finally moved here, we didn't know Heart was here. We had no idea. It wasn't the reason we came here. But we both have backgrounds around, some kind of spirituality. I would say we talk a lot these days about cultivation. I mean, Sue's been a long time cultivator since I've known her, and before that, right? Always trying to figure out, what makes her tick and what how to solve maybe some of the sufferings that she had in her life. And so, when we moved here, she was actually on the phone with a friend of hers from work, and she told him where she lived, and he said, "Oh, you mean near Heartwood?" And she said, "What's Heartwood?" And he described it. And he said, "You're so lucky you get to live right next to Heartwood. Like literally, we're 3.5 miles up the road." And so that generated curiosity. I mean, Sue made the first couple of visits here, and listened to some Dharma talks, and then I kind of came along with her, and from there it was, I guess the rest is history, as they say. So, but for me, lots of catching up to do. I had the system that I knew in my 20s and 30s. That was kind of a guru yoga, a Kundalini-based system. You took initiation from the guru, and the Kundalini began to work in your body, clear the channels, and it was this kind of a process. The emphasis was really on meditation and mantra. So we used mantra to meditate. We also used mantra throughout the day to kind of, keep our minds, quiet. So I got a long way with that, and that was great. But so coming to Heartwood, I said, well, Buddhism, another Eastern philosophy, check it out. Well, kind of a whole new language, and lots of catching up to do. So, terms like emptiness, dependent origination, 6 sense gates, suttas, 3 of this, 6 of that, 10 of these. The jhanas, the 6 paramitas, prajna, the 4 immeasurables. I mean, lots of jargon. And so, okay, well, listening, taking what I can, and going from there. Early struggles were probably around, how to practice meditation, whether or not to use a mantra. And that was a big thing for me, because I had actually, before I started coming here, I had actually started a meditation practice again. Because, in our retirement, we always envisioned, no matter how busy our lives were with our jobs and things like that we'd pick up with our spirituality, we'd get back to it. So I'd started a practice, a meditation practice, and I used mantra because that's what I knew. It's the same mantra. That mantra is still there. It comes up all the time. If I was like, got hit by a car right now and dying, that mantra would probably be the first thing that came up, in a stressful situation. So that's what I knew. And then I started to get exposed to Buddhism, and hoping we could have a little fun with this. But we have a few things that the Buddha left us. He finally decided, after several years of teaching, that he needed to leave something. So he taught these things, and one of the things is the 4 noble truths, and they are the truth of suffering, the truth of the causes of suffering, the truth of the end of suffering, and the truth of the path that leads to suffering. Well, in my background, we didn't have suffering. We had bliss and the possibility of bliss, how to achieve bliss, but we didn't have suffering. So this was a complete flip for me. So I said, well, I mean, obviously it'll take time to understand what they really mean by all this. There must be a path. There must be something. So sure enough, there's the Eightfold Path. And it kind of reads like this: right view, right resolve, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi. Now, the first thought I have, even now when I read that, thank goodness there's so many other teachings. If we were just left with this, I think in this world where there's right and wrong, and there are clear lines around what's right and wrong, depending on who you're talking to, this kind of thing can be a real problem, right? What is right view? What's right resolve? I mean, how do we know? And so there. And then, of course, every religion has its rules. It's something to live by. And so we have the precepts. And so, there's, and I remember, okay, refrain from killing living beings, the first one. Okay, we have that. We have that by Catholic religion. We have that. We have that in the laws, right? We don't kill. Normally, though, we think about people, right? We think about people. We don't kill people. Well, I got that. It's no problem. Easy. But it says living beings. And so you realize, well, wow. Okay. So now I'm given to carrying spiders out of the house. I had a mouse problem last year in the garage. They made a hole in the bottom of the garage and were coming in. It was cold out. So they were coming in and making a mess and drilling holes through things. And so how to get them out? Well, my first thought was, well, I don't want to kill them. I can avoid it. So when you go to the hardware store to look for a way to get the mice out without, you see like 9 or 10 ways to kill them. And there happened to be one way to capture them. So I spent, it must have been a few months capturing mice. They had a way in, so I would capture the mice and then I would drive 2 or 3 miles away and put them somewhere, hopefully not, and tried not to put them near somebody else's house so they would just go in their garage. Nevertheless, I'm capturing and releasing these mice because refrain from killing living beings. The reaction of the mice when we finally got to our destination, to let them out of the little trap and to have them sort of roll on the grass and then look back at me and as if, did you just let me go? Am I free? And then scamper off, and I did that 3 or 4 times. I finally figured out how they were getting in and how to make it so that they couldn't get in that way anymore. And I don't have a mouse problem anymore. So that's been a journey, right? Just that one precept, right? There's layers to all of this. I don't kill people. I do kill spiders, ants, all these things, right? So now I'm getting really good at when there's a spider or some kind of a fly, depending on, there's different techniques. You can catch them in a cup, take them outside. You can use a tissue, certain technique to catch them without crushing them. Get them outside, maybe fold the tissue a couple of times so they're in there. They can't get out. I don't want them on my hand, so we take them out. Refrain from taking what is not given. Oh, stealing. Do not steal. Get that. We had that. But like everything I'm learning in Buddhism, it goes, these things have layers, right? So now, just taking what is not given. Without taking a possession of you as a physical possession, I can take something from you just by how I say something. And you feel obligated to return something to me based upon how I approached you, how I spoke, right? So there's layers to this. Refrain from sensual misconduct. All right, rape, abuse, let's stay away from those things. We get that. We have that. So not new. Sensual misconduct. Again, it's deeper. It goes deeper. We have 6 senses. In Buddhism, we have 6 senses. We have 5 physical senses. We're aware of what those are. And we have the 6th sense, the mind. Well, let's not misuse our mind, our hands, our ears. Let's not abuse the senses that we have. And I really believe these are intended to help. It's not just, these kind of rules can also be seen as population control, right? Let's keep everybody. But this is to help. We have this mind, And we need to manage our minds in order to reduce suffering. We learn ultimately when we get into this. And if we abuse our senses and the ways that the mind works for us, and we create habits and behaviors, then those create suffering, and then we need to overcome those. So again, more layers. Refrain from malicious speech. I mean, that's a kind of an obvious one. That's easy. It targets speech, the one sense. Not too many layers to go there. But again, the way we speak is usually tinged with oftentimes something we want, something we don't want, something we don't like. We want attention for ourselves somehow, right? So there's a lot to these things. And refrain from the use of intoxicants. So, we're in America, there's alcohol, right? So, for many, many years, alcohol's been a way, stressful week at work, busy jobs, driving all over the place. Got through that. Now I'm going to go have a couple of drinks and, with dinner or whatever. And, to the point where you're saying you're going to dinner, but really you're going out to have a couple of drinks. That's really what, and then the dinner's there. And so my relationship, though, to alcohol, and I can't tell if it's because I'm getting older. I'm 61 now. I can't tell if it's because I'm getting older or because of the Buddhist practice that we're all engaged in here, I'm getting more sensitive. But I find my tolerance for any kind of alcohol is becoming less and less and less. I'll make you laugh. Wednesday. So we go out once a week to have dinner. And we're down to one drink. So we have one drink with dinner. Now, usually it takes me the whole dinner to get through the drink now. And I have like half left at the end. Sometimes I'll slug it down. Sometimes I just leave it. This particular night, I slugged it down. I came home. Now, Tuesday, Anyawati had asked me to do this talk. So, my mind is going. I feel like, I'm connected. I'm not feeling totally stressed out, right? I'm fine. I have that drink. I come home. I'm disconnected. I can't afford this. I can't afford to be disconnected. The Dharma talk could come to me at any point in time. I can't afford this. And I really, really, really felt disconnected and didn't like it. To the point where, Sue and I actually talked about it the next day. So, this is recognizing whether or not things are beneficial or not, and then going through a process of letting them go. It's kind of what this whole path is about. Anyawati always says, is it beneficial or not beneficial? There's really only two choices we ever need to make about anything in our lives. Is it beneficial or not beneficial? And then as we begin to see and really analyze and look, now we can sit and analyze our alcohol use. I know it's not good for this reason and all these things, but then we still go out and have it because we still want it, right? But it's a process, so it's a process. But as long as we're paying attention, we can come to manage these things. So way back in the beginning, if anybody can remember way back in the beginning when they started using a place like this, or coming here and using the Dharma, well, just take a drink. I recall way back in the beginning, we can all probably remember a time when we get into something like this, we were worried about what we were going to have to give up. And we were right. But as time goes on, the things naturally fall away. It's not that we can't be a part of the group because of this, this, and this. The precepts are not rules or prerequisites for us being here. They're guidelines for living a good life. That simple. So now I'm more than happy to let things go. I'm looking for things to let go. I love finding new things to let go, new ways of seeing things, to let them go. And it's kind of weird to say that this is a path of, it kind of really is. It's boiled down to Buddhism about letting go. but it's letting go of the things that no longer serve us, that keep us kind of trapped. Bhanyawadi shared a book with us, The Prison of Life, and he goes through all the different ways that, no matter how free we might be physically, we may not be in a physical prison, how we imprison ourselves here with our minds. So, I just wanted to share some of the ways that I see this, if it's useful. We come to, pretty quickly, we come to suffering. I mean, the discussion of suffering is this is top of mind in Buddhism. That's what we talk about. It happens to be the way I look at everything. I see nothing but suffering everywhere. Now I have a name for it. I also understand, when I see it there, I understand what causes that same suffering in me. And because of that, I have compassion now. I'm starting to, right? Have compassion for what I see out there, because the difference between me and another person and what they might be going through with something that I could just as easily be doing is here. It's a sort of a managing our minds. So the biggest thing that I think I've gotten out of the last 3 years is this mind, we have to manage our minds. If we don't, then we're just being pulled along through this life. And as the Buddha master says, we're on like an airport, one of those airport walkers, you get on it and it takes you to the end. Eventually that thing's going to end. And that's going to be the end of our life. So, and is that how we want to spend the years that we have here, especially when we have an opportunity to do better than that? And so suffering seems to sort of, we're not happy with the way things are right now. We think we'll be happier at another time. We cling to we have a certain outcome in mind. All these things cause us to suffer. We lack an awareness of impermanence. We kind of put that off. We don't really talk about that. We don't think about it. Everybody knows we're going to die. We don't really focus on it. We don't really sort of believe things are always going to keep changing. We think we can put them in place and have them be fixed. So all the different ways that we cause ourselves suffering. We see it out there in the world, all the time. Once we become aware of it ourselves, we see to what lengths people go through, and how much suffering they might cause for others, because they can't understand why things keep changing in their lives, why the things they think they love keep going away, or whatever it is. To me, this path has brought me such a sense of, I guess, meaning, that I now consider, I say this all the time at home, boredom to be the height of suffering. There's absolutely no need for boredom. Boredom comes from, where does boredom really come from? It comes from we're not in touch with, an inherent sense of kind of meaning, any way to sort of feel like we can make progress with our circumstances in life. We're looking for ways to distract ourselves, or situations that will happen that will distract us, and we're never kind of here right now, and we're always looking for the next thing, and then that next thing isn't doing it. This TV show is not doing it. There's all this boredom, and when people are not, honestly, it's hard to say, but when people are not doing the kind of thing we're doing in whatever path they're on, boredom is all there is. And to me, it's a height of suffering. There's just no need for it. We with a close relative who comes and visits us often, and her life is rife with boredom and the fear of boredom. So you talk about suffering, and it's boredom and the fear of boredom. And so it's calling out, is that show coming on tonight? Do you know how to put it on? Can you put it on for me? It's all these this fear, and just holding on to all these things that are going to get us through, this evening, so we don't have to be here with whatever suffering is there. And boredom just kind of leads the way in so many lives. It's disappointing for me to see. It's hard for me to see. So then, of course, back to the fun, we have karma, uh, cause and effect. Everything we do kind of matters on some level. So again, there's levels. There's all this, everything's levels. Whatever we do, whatever we say, even whatever we think, I believe, has an effect in this world. And we own that effect. We own it. If I mindlessly say something to someone, I thought it was funny, maybe I got a little edge today, and I put something in someone's mind that then causes them some level of suffering, I own that. I own that thing. It's mine. It'll come back. It's got to cause an effect. What's the effect of that going to be? This person's going to suffer. They might lash out at me. They might lash out at somebody at home because of something I said. It's going to be an effect. So really, really, really learning, about our own minds teaches us how to not manage the minds of others, but manage, how much suffering we cause others, right? We're really trying to minimize our own suffering, but in doing so, we then have the tools to minimize other sufferings. And I think that's the whole point of the path. Turns out, cause and effect can be used to our advantage. If we put harmful causes into out there, then we get harmful effects. If we could put good actions out there, though, we get good effects. So we can actually improve our quality of life by using the one fact, the one sort of solid fact that's true about the universe we live in, is that there's cause and effect. We can use it to create our own hell, or we can create it we can use it to create a paradise here on earth. So that's kind of a way I like to look at karma. I remember thinking about karma in my 20s and 30s, sort of the whole yoga thing. There was a lot of karma. This is not new to me, right? Suffering was new to me here, but karma is not new to me. But it had a tinge of kind of, retribution. What you do, right? And this was very, very similar to what I grew up with in my religion of origin. So some resistance to that. But here, it occurs to me it's a system, something we can use to better our lives and to better the lives of others if we understand it and if we accept it. So then, of course, another one of these words. I remember the first time Vajrayedeepa said, emptiness. This is one of those Buddhist words. Before I even felt like I could take a step towards understanding emptiness, it was probably a year. I heard him say it. He said, everyone should read, it was the dependent origination, Samuppada, Paticca Samuppada, I think it was. He held it up like this. Now, as someone who's had a guru in the past and that kind of a system, if the teacher says do this, then I do it. So he says read this, and so I read this. Now this is going to help me to understand emptiness. I started reading this thing about halfway through it. It's not working. I don't get it. It's making things worse. So what I did, though, is I didn't give up. I actually found a podcast where someone talked through, there's the 12 stages, of the 12 steps of, I guess, this dependent origination. And they talked through it, and I was able to follow them as they talked through it. And that helped me. Still didn't help me understand emptiness, but it helped me to understand what I was told was an important system, this idea of dependent origination, like everything depends on everything else. It really kind of all boils down to that cause and effect thing again. But it's an important, I guess, theoretical concept here in Buddhism. So after all this time, as I started working with cultivation and what is cultivation and the teachings around what is cultivation, if anybody's not familiar with what is cultivation, that's a discourse that was given by the Buddha master, Dorje Chang, Buddha III. He's Panyawadi's master and Panyawadi's teacher's master as well. And he produced this discourse. It was an answer to a question of Panyawadi's teacher, actually. He was given a discourse, and she asked this question: what is cultivation in Buddhism? And he gave this discourse, and he gave some practices in it as well. And through those practices, I came to see that if I get my eyes off myself, where everything's not about me and mine and what I want and how this affects me, and I really start to turn my attention to how, I can only control my actions, my thoughts, my speech, how those things, on my end kind of, affect others, then I become more hindered. I become more empty of self. And so now I come to understand emptiness to be, how much can I get myself out of the way to let life happen? So just to be here right now and in doing this with you folks, I don't know how I look. I can see it, but I haven't been looking at that. Right? I don't know how I looked. I don't know how I sound. I don't know if any of this makes any sense. But emptiness, right? It's not so much the concern. The concern is I was given an opportunity and I'm grateful for it. So, some of the subtleties of that, some of the layers of that, as an example, would be if I say something to make you laugh, did I really say that to uplift you or get attention from myself? What are the intentions? What are the motivations behind the things that we do? Getting touch in that, truth and thought, speech and action, really watching out for our intentions. What am I really saying? When am I giving and when am I actually taking? And when am I taking what I'm not giving? Are my gifts pure, no strings attached? Or am I looking for some kind of praise? Another term we use, selfing, right? So if it's the latter, if there's strings attached, if I'm looking for some kind of praise or recognition, then we call that selfing, that it's about us. It's all about us. And what I've arrived at with emptiness, and I'm sure there's more to this, I know there is. Somehow I got to link that back up with dependent origination. That's to be done. Nevertheless, to me, emptiness right now means less of me, more of what I can contribute, less of what I need. I developed a practice around that literally, we have kind of a relative that visits often, and she's elderly. She's in her 90s. She's almost 90, and just 90 years of really a lot of that self concern, suffering, the way we understand it. And when I walk into the room with her now, before I come out, like so in the bedroom, before I leave the bedroom to go into the room, I remind myself, no needs. I have no needs. I have no needs. What can I do for her? What can I do for her? Now, does that make me someone who's running around at her beck and call? No. If you saw me walking around the house, you'd say, he's hardly paying attention to her. But if I see that she's hunting around, looking for a glass of water, I just get it. If she's talking and she's telling me, a story that she's already told me 75 times since I've known her, 3 times since she's been here, 2 times on the ride over, can I just engage? Can I just give the dignity of having a conversation? Those things I can do. Why? Because I don't have any needs. Everything's taken care of: a home, wife, food, the resources to retire, jobs. I can give. I can give. This is not about me. We had her over. We're going to make sure that we honor that. So just some of the ways that I try to, work with this concept of getting myself out of the way, not so much focus on me. So cultivation, we mentioned that. This is really a way to transform our minds. I'm seeing how my mind really can be transformed. And we have to practice with our minds. We have to work with our minds. I'm in situations all the time. I'm an engineer by trade, so very detail-oriented mind, notice everything. I see a lot of stuff. So, and a judging mind, critical, always, is this good or bad? What's happening here? And, have a tendency to sort of be a little harsh sometimes, a little kind of overbearing maybe. But even in my quiet, you don't hear me, but in my mind, I'm noticing things, I'm seeing things. And so to me, part of cultivation is, working with my mind as continuously as I can in order to kind of shift it from this habitual kind of judging and being critical of what's happening out there as a way of occupying my mind so it's not focused on what's happening right now, even with me, is to shift it. So, let's say I'm at the gym. I'm at the gym 3 times a week. There are people at the gym besides me, big surprise. Contention for machines. So, I have a certain routine that I go through. I don't need to go through it in order. However, it's nice if I can, do some things, when they come up. And there'll be someone, sitting at the machine, talking to someone else, really not doing anything with the machine, not aware that someone else might want to use it. You can see where my mind goes, And so, but I'm catching myself now and shifting to wishing them well, wanting the very best for them, really, performing a little loving kindness to replace. And so it's almost like a penalty I pay. When my mind gets down a judging track like that, I catch myself, and then I have to go through this. So now I'm on the chess machine like this, and I'm doing reps, and I've got to go through this little sort of loving kindness thing. Because, right? So it's like a little penalty I have to pay. But shifting the mind, and I'm finding that, I'm much less, like literally my mind would literally develop two years ago, my mind would have developed a whole story about that person just in the 3.5 minutes that, this all might have transpired. Now I'm just not even bothering going there, and I'm catching myself and kind of leaving that off and being free to kind of just, again, stay focused on me. Bhanyawadi says all the time, what we think in Parna becomes the inclination of our mind. Again, our mind is our responsibility. It's our only responsibility, really. And if we manage this well, everything else kind of falls into place. That's what I'm finding. There are some practices that, from what is cultivation, that I've adopted that help me. One of them is seeing everyone as your mother. I lost my mother when I was 2. I didn't even know that happened consciously in my life until I was old enough to realize that some of my brothers and sisters had a different last name than me. I mean, literally. I had a stepmother within a year of the time my mother passed away. She was my mother. So, but, I do wonder, in this practice, seeing everyone as my mother. So here I'm in the gym and I'm seeing what people are doing, and just, we need one another. We need people. We need people in the grocery store. We need people in the gym. We work out of our house. We don't get out a lot. So you hear me talking about the gym. It's one place I go where I see people all the time, besides the tennis court. In tennis, we don't talk a lot. In gym, we don't talk a lot either. But we're sitting around a lot, which gives this a chance to get going, which is what's probably unique about the gym. But seeing everyone as my mother. Like literally looking at someone and saying, if this was my mother, wouldn't I roll out the red carpet? What are your needs? What can I do for you? Sit down. Let me get to know you, right? So this is how we should treat everyone. It's a great practice for me to get my eyes off myself, is to really practice seeing everyone as my mother. Self and others are equal. I believe at some level, we're all working with the same stuff. Our brains might be different. So we have someone who's completely handicapped and can't see or talk. That's a brain deficiency. But they have a mind just like we do. If we have a fully functioning faculty and we have a mind, I believe we all have the same, we're all drawn from the same resource. We all have the same mind. And ours is bundled up in this little package right here, and it's got all the experiences that we kind of laid on it. But we're all equal. Self and others are equal. So when I see someone suffering in a certain way, or aggravating me in a certain way, or acting in a way that seems harmful, even when I see folks on television, in the news, who have done really bad things, they haven't done anything I'm not capable of. We're all capable of this. We all have a mind. It's a matter of how we manage our mind. We're making different choices in this life. We're making different choices so far in our lives. But we've all been angry. We've all seen how things can escalate. We've all seen how we can get into mental tracks, and all of a sudden something happened. We didn't want it. We didn't want it to happen that way. But we got down the road, right, with our minds. So I think all things are possible with everybody, and so there's really no need to judge when someone is having a hard time or does something sort of we think is really bad. I think there's too much of that. We see enough of it on the news. I'm really kind of getting to the point where I can't even watch the news anymore, because it's just all about who did what wrong, what's right and wrong. There's always got to be a counter argument. There's always got to be some kind of counterpoint, just because we need to get viewers. It's about ratings. We need to sell commercials. I don't want to be a victim of that, right? I starting to care more, too much for my mind to want to go through that every day. So now I mostly watch the local news for the weather. What's the weather? What's happening in this area? I watch the Asheville news. We'll look at the headlines for the nightly news. Maybe there's some news, something about Social Security, we're retiring, something. We want to be informed. But we will hear the headlines, what they're going to talk about. Nowadays with our phone, you kind of know what the headlines are anyways, right? So unless there's something there, we kind of don't bother. Managing our minds, cultivating our minds to be what we want them to be, just not happening out there. I think with things like social media, I think it started back in the day with cable news, right? And just access to news that people had. And now social media, I think there's so many people with social media that just can't handle it. They can't handle that level of information. They're not actively managing their minds, and therefore they're susceptible to whatever comes their way. And it creates suffering, it creates anger. It splits people up. So there's a lot of suffering around, whether or not people are managing their minds. So I'm grateful I have opportunity to learn in the system. I'm grateful the Buddha had 40 years to teach this stuff, because if all I had was those Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path to work with, I don't think I'd know where to start. But he had 40 years, and there's a recording of about 40 years of his teachings, from what I understand. So thank goodness, because learning to manage this mind, we need examples all the time. Which kind of brings me to the Sangha. What do we benefit from the Sangha? I remember even in the yoga days with the ashram, we had a program once a week. It was on Thursday nights. It was a public program. And I worked in Boston at the time. The ashram was in Boston. I worked third shift, and I would drive up early and go to and I would do my practice during the week. And I remember by around Tuesday or Wednesday, really needing the hit, that refresh, a reminder of what it was I was trying to do. I really, really needed that hit. And I would go on Thursday and come out flying out of there. We did chanting, and it was just great. Flying out of there, and then I'd be good for another good 4 or 5, 6 days, and then by Thursday came around. So, I notice even for as frequently as we get together here, sometimes because of work or whatever I need to miss, I notice, man, you get away from it for a week or two, all that stuff, all the stuff I cleared away in my 20s and 30s got real clear, right? Once I sort of let it go, did the householder thing and all that, all comes flooding back. So, I find, thank you all for, the Sangha, just the benefit that we provide to one another. This is a little bit like being here in what we talk about here, what we share, the level at which we can share. The fact that I can mention one of these subtle little things about what I learned about suffering and how I can impact someone else's suffering by just saying this or that. The fact that I can even talk about that here is kind of similar to how, someone that goes to war and experiences battle, when they come back to civilization, they're a misfit. Why? Because they've got a set of experiences that nobody can relate to when they come back. It's nobody's fault. Nobody can relate to it. They need to be among a group of their peers in order to find community and to share those, to talk about those things. Imagine that you need to talk about having killed people, maybe even in a certain situation, a child was involved, and all those kinds of things that those guys or the women go through. Who can they talk about that with? We have to talk about what we feel. And so they need that unique community. Well, it turns out that what we're talking about here today, we walk outside these 4 walls, there's no common ground. Nobody's working on this, right? Out there. So we really need one another, and I'm grateful. Grateful for the teachers, to have teachers. Now, in yoga, we had a guru, but the guru was in India most of the time. So to have teachers at the level that we do, present with us, to spend time with us, up to 3 times a week, is absolutely incredible. We're so fortunate. And then to have the masters, behind them, to really sort of, elevate what we're trying to do here is huge. So we have a few more minutes before 1 o'clock. If anyone wants to share, if anything I said kind of triggered an experience of yours, feel free. They're open, but for my part, I'm finished. Sure.
At least one person. I started coming here in November of, just before the COVID hit. It came in March. And so I never got to know anybody. And then the Zoom, and I felt like, well, I'm part of the Sangha, but what's left? And I still don't know a lot of your names, some of the faces. And just one by one, I learned your name today. I feel closer, even though I don't know anything about you. So the sharing, I've thought that I wished we had opportunities, maybe once a month or something, to get together in an informal way where we could just share with each other whatever, without a program. That's just my need I felt.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like today you gave us that, and I appreciate your willingness to just be authentic and be selfless in sharing, because I'm not going to give you any money.
Oh, really? I guess I didn't read the fine print.
No data for you. It's for you 1 year.
together with a meal at all these, many of these functions. And it's a real social, I mean, family, everybody's in it together. Really wonderful. There's a lot we miss here in this part of the world, possibly because of our abundance and our laissez-faire. Who needs anybody? We have everything we need. We have our air conditioner, we have our TV, we have our microwave. It's a different way of not interdepending on friendships. Anyway, I think you get my point, right? Yeah. I hope.
We build our porches in the backyard.
Thank you.
To your point.
Thank you, Joe. You really did a fabulous. Didn't you do a fabulous? Today, we're involved with a very divided country. And someone said that it was pretty interesting, broad generalization, because we have people who see things through only good and evil, and other people on this side seeing things between the difference between rich and poor. That makes sense. So you have the Democrats. I'm one. I call myself a Bolshevik. We have the Bolsheviks on this side, and they're seeing inequalities and also suffering. And then you have people who see on the other side that just say anything those people believe in is bad, evil, it's against America. And it's just a really, anyway, this is me thinking, but what one politician, aspiring politician said, which gave me a lot of thought, even though he said very little. He didn't give platforms in the beginning. He didn't say we need this infrastructure, we need a defense, it's strong, and we need this environment. Yes, we do. But what he said was that we have to listen to the other side. People won't get anything done if they don't listen. And when you listen, you have to, like as you said, you have to be of service to someone else. You have to look into their mind too.
Mm-hmm.
And we all are, you're right, we're all the same. We have the same emotions. And to get through that fear, I think the biggest barrier today is to work with that other person's fears and your own fears.
Mm-hmm.
And be able to sit down with the enemy, the other, and understand them is the beginning of getting anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Criticizing and isolating ourselves is probably the worst.
Yeah.
I'll keep my mouth shut.
No, I call that other focus. It kind of goes back to something I was thinking about regarding the Four Noble Truths. If you heard the first noble truth, it would be that there is suffering. And I'm sure even 2,500 years ago, when the Buddha was living, there were wars and all kinds of calamities that happened, and people went after one another and did bad things, and all those things were going on. So yes, there's suffering. Even a layperson, even someone who wasn't the Buddha could say, yeah, I can see suffering. I see it everywhere. And I could see the cause for suffering. It's this one because they're greedy, and they're going after that one because they have this, and it's this one, it's this one. But so see, even the layperson can come up with that, but it's outward. And so I guess the next step we're trying to take here is taking it inward and saying we're contributing to the problem. So how can we work our side of the fence so that we're less of a problem, less of a contribution to the overall problem in our little way? And so all the people we see and touch and all the situations we find ourselves in, if we can be less of the problem, then things get to sort of move a little more freely. But yeah, no, it's easy to just call out the reason I'm not happy at the gym right now is because that guy won't get off that machine. Right? I mean, but man, this is like chasing mice around the house. I mean, it's not a way to live, not a good way to live at all. You just kind of, there's got to be a reason for my unhappiness. Let me look out there. So, yeah, and it's been going on since, I guess, the human mind was was created. Nancy?
I wanted to thank you, Joe, and I think that you really went through the process of what I found here. Brian and I moved here from Boulder, you know, where he was getting his master's of divinity at Europa, and that was. You take your mask off. Brian and I moved here from Boulder, where he was getting his master's of divinity. Retirement morning can be very boring, and you're there. So, and people, 2 years of life, there's highest mortality of the first year of life and the first year you retire. Because people don't have enough engagement and purpose and serving. So, and I guess the ego, they don't know who they are without it. So just go back. But we had this great Buddhist community there, Tempa, teachers, and when we moved here, we discovered Hartford was still here. I hadn't lived here previously, and not become a member of the Sangha, but visited. And we decided to join. And I think that for me, I know my own suffering by coming here has gone down greatly, and I hope that the causes, my causes of suffering for others has gone down because I have become a much more compassionate person in terms of not judging and looking for discernment of why behavior is different, or and not seeing myself as much as the other, and as you said, realizing by my mind and choice, I could be behaving the same way. And I do really find, even with political figures, that used to cause me lots of suffering, and I still work on it and do another practice for them. Because I really think that when there's a lot of difference and anger, it's because people are passionate about what they want to cling to, and that they're afraid of losing or not getting. And I certainly, my biggest ruin in my life has been here, and it's taking more of a back seat in my life with this practice. And I'm a grateful member, and all of you help support me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to thank you, especially for. Oh, yes. I want to thank you. Especially 2 things stood out for me from your talk that I will carry in my heart. And one is how that Noble Eightfold Path is very multi-level. And just as soon as you think you've got one piece of it down, here comes life with another test to go, really? And then you get to do it again. So it's a process of purification that we're going through, and you pointed beautifully to that. So I want to thank you for that one. The second one I want to thank you for is the word emptiness, or even freedom. We look at that as kind of our ultimate goal, maybe, but emptiness from what? Or freedom from what? And you nailed it when you said, for me, it's emptiness of self. So thank you, my dear friend. I so appreciate your efforts for us here today, and I'm taking a lot of it in my heart.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
You're so amazing.
We're boosting your ego.
I know the reason you're so amazing is because you started out as an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how challenging it can be to have it's like black or white. That's why we go to engineering school. So we don't have all of this other stuff floating around, and it's black and white. And how that must have been such a challenge for you. But I had no idea that you guys were engaged in, an ashram when you were in your 20s. So what a blessing that you had that gift.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to say thank you for always being so courageous. I kind of want to ask you to do this, and I'm sure you're like, okay.
Not really. Nope.
No.
But it was a very brief sort of like, I'm like, am I ready for this? I mean, you think I have anything to share?
Yeah. And so I want to say thank you for that courage. And you're so, and you, the other thing about your courage is your vulnerability. Like you always bring yourself, you always bring yourself to it in areas that are uncomfortable to share about. And I so get your heart, like when you get misty-eyed about things, you're just like so out there all the time. And then the other piece is taking on leadership, particularly now in the Sangha. And I think that's really critical for all of us, is if we were to say, how can you support the Sangha in a leadership role? I think that's like upfront and really important for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, it's like loving sitting back and taking in all of the wonderful things that Panawati is giving us.
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you.
There'll need to be a shift, yeah.
Yeah.
Dharma, action, reaction, and if we want to have a Sangha, if we want this to prosper, we have to think of what we can contribute, each one of us.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just sit back. Anybody familiar with the term Shimpa? You hear that word, Shimpa?
Mm-hmm.
So something Pima Chodron talked about on a DVD that I have. Fascinating lady, very, very humorous and very, very down to earth. She has a Sangha establishment in Nova Scotia. Anyway, Shempa is a hook. And what really keeps us sometimes chained emotionally is that we all have a hook. What I'm trying to say is that your mother, your father had vicious things to say to you when you were a child. If you carry that into your adulthood, and we do, all Joe has to do is just go like this, and that's it. He's got your Shempa. And he didn't even do anything. He just scratched his head. But that, I'm being silly, but that triggers emotional response in you that goes back to when you were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we all have accepted, taken some abuse in our lifetime. I mean, anyone in this room can say it. I've had such a charming, wonderful, enchanted life. No one ever said anything nasty to me, or was a bully, or beat me up, or I never witnessed drug dependency in my family. Or I would love to hear that, but I don't think that happens in this lifetime.
Mm.
So it depends on how deep that hook has gotten into us that stops us from that unconditional freedom, that release of the mind and the heart that we're all seeking. And that's very difficult. That is really, really a challenge. If that's a condition, a conflict we have in us that's really deep, embedded. Don't get rid of that. You really will always have this.
Yeah.
Your own suffering that's really not necessary.
Mm-hmm. I've heard it said as well, there are certain things like trauma, deep trauma, things like that, where, something like this kind of a practice wouldn't be able to take you so far. You really need professional help from someone who can help you get at what it is that's down there that needs to come out in a much more expeditious way than you could ever probably accomplish, on your own with teachings like this. So, there's a such thing, I guess I've heard of spiritual bypass, where it's like we think that this is, because there's a lot of overlap, I find, with psychology here. I mean, it's, if someone didn't know this was a spiritual practice hall and they came in to listen to one of Panyawati's Dharma talks, they might think it was a psychological talk, because it's all about our minds and what our intentions are and why did we do that? Why did we think that? Do you know why you have that intention every time this happens? It goes to psychology. But, I've heard it said, that, some of the stuff that we experience, like you're saying, Stu, goes so deep that it requires special care to get it up, to dig it up, to bring it to the surface so that it can be worked with in a safe environment. And I don't have those particular experiences myself, but yeah, So
Buddhist authors and teachers like Jack Kornfield, Thich Nhat Hanh, they deal with things like that too. And having meditation where you're releasing deep-seated fears or angers against someone who's even dead. How do you deal with someone who's passed on and you cannot speak to them?
yeah,
And you have to bring them up in imagery during meditation. So Buddhist psychology is really fascinating.
absolutely,
Thanks for listening.
absolutely.
I was in a 3-year seminary that was esoteric Christianity and all the religions of the world, and we went deep into everything. It was very, very deep program. It was a 3-year seminary. And you were not allowed, you were not accepted into that seminary if you were not psychologically sound to begin with. Because when you start dealing with the esoteric, I'm not talking esoteric Buddhism, but esoteric in all the religions, it's going to stir up the Kundalini. And we had one person who was hospitalized because she was not, her stuff came up, but she was also pushing the Kundalini, and the person can go insane. And I've always been aware of that in my practice because when I started, the head of this seminary was in Europe, and they didn't know any better. And I asked for the books, and I kept reading. I did another book and another book, and in about 3 months, I had read 3 years worth of their books. And when she came back, she said, "You get down here to Florida." I was in Minnesota right now because she was worried about what was going on in me physiologically, the energy that I was going to go. So anybody getting involved in this kind of work needs to have their psychology taken care of first, or it's dangerous. They're just not ready. You can bypass that by being spiritual and bury the stuff that you never dealt with, and then it's worthless. It's more dangerous. So that's really true.
So I feel in a lot of this, and I do think there's a lot, but I also think we are not our experiences, whether it's from, we inherit epigenetically, maybe you call it karma from the past, but science is epigenetics, fears, experiences, things that trigger us that we don't even know. And neurons that fire together, wire together, Dan Siegel. And so beyond psychology, there's a whole lot of neurophysiology, biology, and it's the whole package, but it's not an excuse. And, the pause we're taught to be responsible for our response versus reaction to things so that we have the right intention for things. But it all, for me, comes back down to the same thing that Tai Chi does, practice.
Anyone else?
Getting deep.
Indeed. Well, thank you all, truly. I will see you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.